Brad Fay, 48, September 1st, 2025, Episode 6, and another 100 people. Hello, social media mites and mavens. James Hohman here. If you're going to get lost, don't do it alone. My goal at the beginning of the summer of 1975 was to save as much money as I could and relocate to New York City the following September. You see, Gus was more interested in using me in terms of company administration and having a standby for his other male company members. I was too balletic. And at 27 years of age, I knew the window I had for performing in any company was closing quickly, which was confirmed for me after my third week of classes with the Joffrey Ballet Studio on West 10th Street in Manhattan. Now, we all had equity cards, which meant we could all attend AEA auditions for Broadway shows. The other option was the quote open call unquote auditions that were overrun with masses of wannabes, but not managed as well. They weren't called cattle calls for nothing. I had made reservations for a room at the Iroquois Hotel on West 44th Street for the first 2 weeks. Remembering exactly how our group of 6 young thespians managed getting into that one room remains a very fuzzy mystery. But we did it. The equity office was just around the corner. We all knew about the weekly newspaper publications of both Backstage and Show Business, which advertised all the scheduled auditions weekly. In addition to luggage, dance bags, and shoes, our room was perpetually littered with these weeklies. It was a mess, but we were all filled with so much positive, goal-directed energy that the improbability of having our dreams being realized wasn't a conscious realization. There were but a few differences in our naivete. I was the only person who had ever visited New York City. I knew uptown from downtown, east side from west side, had any subway experience, and had no parental backing for this escapade. Being the eldest, I became the cat wrangler. Additionally, all 5 of my pop-eyed optimist colleagues had secured financial backing for their moves. My $650 went quickly, very quickly. Somehow, 3 of us accomplished our Broadway dreams, Kevin within the first month. Mary Beth and I took a little longer. Michael moved back to Chicago. Debbie joined the U.S. Air Force before Thanksgiving. And Laura dated New York's finest, 3 of them at the same time. Our individual journeys were very different, but our dreams were very real, and not without upset. Should you be interested in contacting me, please click on the website, jlhoman.com. Thank you for your time and consideration. And another 100 people. Stepping off the train in New York City's Pennsylvania station was exhilarating. The fact that none of us had slept overnight didn't matter. Our adrenaline was in overdrive. Somehow, I instinctively knew uptown from downtown and the east side from the west side, while my 5 other colleagues were all agog and more than a little lost. It took a while to corral these cats, but finally we checked into the Iroquois Hotel on West 44th Street. I was feeling very James Dean, don't you know, since that was his chosen hotel when he had moved to the city. Talk about light years from Kenosha. Within 3 weeks, we had all found reasonably furnished housing. Mary Beth and Michael moved to an apartment on the Upper East Side. The remaining 4 of us rented a railroad flat on West 46th Street's Restaurant Row, beginning October 1st. Laura and Debbie selected the front bedroom, while Kevin and I took the back bedroom. Our first apartment became the base of operations for 3 singers and 1 dancer. Being so centrally located, all four of us could walk to most auditions, which were usually scheduled between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. We each established personal phone services, enabling casting people to leave messages with requests and/or instructions following those auditions. Most of our time together in that apartment involved stapling our resumes to 8 by 10 glossy photographs and discussing the quality of our competition. Thus began our waiting game of indefinite dimension. Almost immediately, Laura began dating cops, three of whom were named Jim. Relying, relaying messages from Jim became very complicated. Since Debbie hadn't even been asked to a callback within our first month and a half, she decided that she would enlist in the Air Force, announcing her departure following Thanksgiving. Within our first month, Kevin was cast in the 20th anniversary revival of My Fair Lady, the first of 8 Broadway shows for which he would be hired. I struggled but persevered. Having used the last of my savings for the first month's rent, and not having parents who were subsidizing this excursion, as did my roommates, I concentrated on finding that guy with whom I'd slow danced in Kansas City. It took me 3 weeks to locate Chris through the Actors Equity office, but he finally did return the message I'd left on his service. Coincidentally, Chris worked between his acting jobs at Great Aunt Fanny's, the restaurant located almost directly across 46th Street from our apartment. His kindness and generosity kept me eating daily, if only a sandwich from Fanny's or a pretzel from a sidewalk vendor. Kevin kept the apartment and coffee and popcorn our daily staples. My weight plummeted to 122 pounds, while my roommates were able to count the ribs in my back. I realized this was not healthy, but I could not go home or even back to Chicago, which is what Mary Beth and Michael eventually decided to do. After my third ballet class at the Joffrey Dance Studio on West 10th at 7th Avenue, I was asked to meet the company administrator, Mrs. Daddario, and was given a scholarship for unlimited classes. However, that scholarship lasted only about 20 minutes because they thought I was 20 years of age when I was actually 27. Once that fact was determined, I was deemed too old to be scholarshiped for the company. Oh, well, I did, however, get to change clothes with Patrick Swayze in the men's dressing room. Patrick's wife, Lisa, was a member of the Joffrey Company. Having lost my chance to dance with the Joffrey, I had to find a full-time job and redefine my goals. Because I had sung in chorus throughout high school and college, had done loads of civic theater, and had my Actors Equity card, Chris encouraged me to audition for Broadway. However, getting cast in my first Broadway show took longer than I had anticipated. I now lapsed into what we called, quote, the slash ranks, unquote, of waiters/dancers/singers/models, and continued to audition. Just before Thanksgiving 1975, I got a job at Jimmy Ray's restaurant on 8th Avenue, around the corner and south of Restaurant Row. I was hired to work the upcoming holiday season because all others, staff and owners, had planned out-of-town holidays. While they all vacationed, I would be the only waiter on duty, working alongside one bartender and a Chinese cook who didn't speak English. With 27 tables, 5 of which were large semicircular booths, I made a great deal of money, but almost literally lost my sanity. During all that madness, however, one customer seemed to have been impressed with my organizational and tray-carrying abilities. The second week of that December, Ted Hook had opened his backstage restaurant on West 45th Street. While lunching at Jimmy Ray's that week, he observed my management of the chaos I was experiencing. As he concluded his lunch, Mr. Hook told me to come see him if I ever left Mr. Ray's employ and wanted a better job. On January 2nd, 1976, Jimmy Ray's entire staff returned from their vacations, refreshed and tanned. I walked in, quit, and then immediately ran around the corner to be hired by Ted Hook. I became Mr. Hook's fifth waiter at Backstage. Little did I know at that point that this new job was to become the closest experience to a Broadway show I could have ever imagined. If I was lost, I was at least rolling in what seemed to be the right direction, and I had money in my pockets. Ted's new restaurant became the new hit of the theater district, designed in shades of tans and browns, with rounded leather banquettes and plush brown carpeting. All his waiters and bartenders wore a zippered brown jumpsuit specifically made for each of us. The back wall was adorned with a giant sepia-toned photo of the legendary actress Tallulah Bankhead, who is Ted's goddess. Ted, a dance veteran of about 400 Hollywood films, had been Ms. Bankhead's personal assistant in the final years of her life. Ted kept his staff and patrons in hysterics with imitations of his goddess's famous wit. Other walls were adorned with photos of other celebrities with whom Ted had worked and also adored. The spot became somewhat notorious, if not historic, for the casts and crews of all Broadway shows before and after. My partner at the time, Christopher, was positively envious. The staff from Great Aunt Fanny's one block north would frequently stop into Backstage after Fanny's closed. Ted Hook's Backstage became the theater hangout for everyone in the city. Ted would lock the front doors at 2 a.m. as the New York City laws regulated, and we would stay sometimes until 5:30 or 6 a.m., continuing to wait on customers' needs in a much more relaxed atmosphere. Following one late night, I remember taking the subway to South Ferry Terminal with others to watch the sunrise over Staten Island in the thrill of a winter chill. Behind us, the city glowed a golden warmth. The universe couldn't have been further. This universe couldn't have been further from the shores of Lake Michigan. Being a waiter at Backstage was great fun, meeting movie and Broadway stars galore, sharing limericks with Maureen Stapleton, Lauren Bacall, as she told me I had great headlights. That's my anterior superior iliac crests, which I'd learned in anatomy class, and quietly sharing bawdy jokes with Ethel Merman. After being complimented by Mr. Harold Prince for being a great waiter, I reminded him that I was a better dancer. I was playing in and with the stars. And then I'd go home to the comfort of Chris's arms. Peter Howard, later to be replaced by Steve Ross, would gleefully accompany anyone who decided to climb aboard the white polished grand piano that served as a cocktail bar. This spot's ambiance was indeed festive, and the cast changed every night. It was extraordinary. It was an extraordinary learning experience in a variety of ways. I heard Barbara Cook, Cheetah Rivera, Liza Minnelli, Jeffrey Holder, Sylvia Sims, Lauren Bacall, Phyllis Newman, Betty Compton, and Adolph Green, all for free. And I became the only waiter Mr. Richard Burton, Sir Richard Burton, would request when his manager made reservations for him and his newest wife, Susie. All evenings ended with everyone singing Charlie Chaplin's Make Someone Happy. I continued to take dance classes and audition, but my evening job and the partying afterward made keeping to a schedule of certain classes extremely difficult. As I was becoming Ted's head waiter, I was learning why it was called show business and not show art. I was waiting on managers, agents, stars, press agents, producers, directors, and casting people. and realized I had a lot more knowledge to refine besides my talents. 6 months later, I left my job at Backstage with a contract to dance in the chorus of Pittsburgh Civic Light Opera's production of Oklahoma, having been the only dancer selected from their New York City open call. My departure from Backstage was celebrated in this limerick written by a fellow waiter and signed by Ted and his entire staff. James is leaving to go and do stock, but he's in for a terrible shock. He'll be dancing and singing, things all very winning, but to do it in Pittsburgh's a crock. Also, Gus Giordano had called to ask if I could return to Chicago that August following the Oklahoma production in Pittsburgh for a 2-week gig in an industrial show he was choreographing at the Navy Pier. I was thrilled to have secured 2 back-to-back jobs for the coming summer months. But life had other plans. Yeah, you know life. As Woody Allen says, life is what happens while you're waiting to die. Before stock rehearsals began, I traveled back to Kenosha to attend my 10-year high school reunion. Surprisingly, I could truly afford to do that. While visiting my hometown, I played volleyball with all gay men wearing Speedos in a backyard tournament at a 30th birthday party for a man I barely knew. The home had a beautifully manicured lawn. As self-sabotage would have it, my right leg landed in a hole hidden beneath this lush green carpet. That right knee hyperextended, bending in the opposite direction that it usually bent. Once I got it back into alignment, it swelled to the size of a football and throbbed excruciatingly.